Welcome to the Glowland podcast, the podcast for remote work and freelancing in practice. Welcome, Tijs. Happy to have you back in the Glowland podcast. How have you been? How are you?
Hey, good. Thank you for having me again. Just saw that it's almost a year ago, I think, that we did our previous podcast. I'm good. Yeah, everything going well. Survived the lockdown, so nothing to complain here. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, for reference, we are in June 2020, and it's basically, we're in Spain, and we both have stayed the last few months here since March in the lockdown. So the lockdown in Spain started on March 11th, I think, something in the second week of March, I think, a little bit later maybe. And last until now with different kind of restrictions for different groups. And we're still somewhat constrained, but mostly free now. Since 2 weeks, I think, we can move freely and we can go back out into restaurants and go to the beach and so on with the necessary protection, like a mask and so on. So the situation, I think, like everywhere in Europe, pretty much was pretty intense. And now it's slowly starting to get more relaxed slowly. Tijs, how did you spend these months mostly? Like I know you worked on your routine app. Maybe you can talk about it a little bit more. I think you worked on it for the last months or years. I think Hobby Grow, or what's the name?
Hobby Grow, yeah.
Okay.
The project has started in September last year. It came out of another project I was doing for project management planning. And I just wanted to have something simple where I could create like a little program, almost like a challenge or a routine that I could easily, put down on a board. And then on my phone, I just get like a to-do list basically. And every day it shows you the activities you need to do or you want to do to get into a routine. And I've been working on it off, depending on on the time I have. I work with some other people on it, so there's also a dependency there. But it's a nice thing to have on the side, and it helped me in many ways to get into routines I've always wanted to get into. It helped me to wake up earlier and to have a little routine in the morning, doing some yoga stretches, some breath work with the famous Wim Hof from the Netherlands, and some other things like trying to learn Spanish. Within my app, I can say, okay, I want to do 50 minutes every day, and I can keep track of how many minutes I spent.
So it's like it's a habit tracking.
It's basically a habit tracker, but before you track your habit, you actually create a program. Say, okay, create one program for the first 2 weeks. We say, 10 minutes a day on this app is enough. And once I get used to this 10 minutes a day, I create another program. Say now I want to do 20 minutes. So it's a quite straightforward. It's in that way, it's a habit tracker. But just a different angle.
Yeah.
And, I'm working on it if I can, but projects, running projects, client projects always have priority.
Yeah.
So it depends a little bit how busy I am and how I feel working on it.
And have you been able to keep your habits? I think that's something that more or less most people struggle with in the quarantine, to keep your habits and stay in the same level of, I think, fitness of body and mind and productivity. If that was a goal, of course. I mean,
there were a few goals, and I must say, most of the habits, some habits come and go. You want to try them out, and after a couple of weeks, you feel like they're not really making a difference, then you stop. And some are a little bit related to to the opportunities we had during the lockdown. For example, I was very consistent in going to the beach every other day in the morning and go for a dive. But then, because of lockdown, I wasn't able to do so. But other habits like meditation, some stretch exercises, waking up early, keep track of my running and my play tennis. So with these things, it's going quite well. And simple habits, like I wanted to be a little bit more involved in this website called Product Hunt, where you can hunt basically for new products. A lot of people working on a side project post things there.
Did you upload your application there? Did you upload HappyGrow there?
Not yet. No, at first, I was like, well, let's get a little bit involved. Let's start at least liking 2 other projects every day. And this is a very easy habit. You can put it in the habit app, and it's just say, like two projects every day, and it's fun. It's easy. But if you don't put it into like a habit tracker, it's easy to forget about it.
Yeah.
And my idea was trying to do this consistent over a period of time. I see that some people start, let's say, like me or join me. Like they want to connect with me. So inside you create already like a little group of people. I hope that will help once I'm going to promote my app over there. So yeah, with these things, it definitely made a difference.
Did you feel like during the lockdown, did you feel more productive or less productive, or on the same level? Kind of, did you basically just to make it more understandable for the listeners? You're splitting your time between freelancing and your own projects, and kind of agency work now, and as a software developer. And did you maintain that kind of ratio of productivity, or did you see that maybe some people report productivity going up, or did you feel like you need more breaks and to process what's going on in the world? Because that's also very understandable if people just take some time off and want to basically manage their anxiety almost in that situation, because it was pretty unusual. I mean, unprecedented, I think, what happened during the outbreak, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I remember here in Spain, it went rather quickly from nothing, and then they announced it, I think, on a Saturday that we would go into a full lockdown. And Monday we were in this full lockdown.
Yeah, in a full lockdown. What that means is, other than in I think even in the Netherlands that wasn't the case. In Sweden, especially not famously, and in Germany also, there was never a full lockdown like in Spain. That means we were not allowed to leave the house at all.
Yeah, and that's a big difference. You have to let that sink in for a moment.
Yeah, it is basically it is imprisonment, a certain way of it. No, if you're told to stay at home, I mean, it's understandable because of the severity of the situation, but it's basically full lockdown means you're stripped of your freedom, a lot of that, basically, immediately. And that was very just that, and just to realize the government has that kind of power, justified or not, is pretty, it's pretty crazy.
It is crazy, yeah. And in the beginning, it was, you were always you were following I was following the news way more. You were counting how many people got sick, how many people got ill. You were wondering if what we're doing right now is the right thing. Seeing how other countries were doing.
Yeah, exactly.
But especially the lockdown. From one day, from I think Friday, I went to the beach. I went running. I visited a friend of mine, and then the other Monday, you were not allowed to go out of your house. Only if you had to do groceries.
Yes, and essential workers could also leave.
Yeah, essential workers could go, and there were some exceptions. I think you could still go to a pharmacy or to a hospital.
Yeah, you could. And I think, the supermarket in the beginning, you didn't have the obligation to wear a mask, but later on you did.
Yeah, and it was no fun. So it became a very, we only went once a week.
Yeah,
with a big shopping list, because you didn't want to go there,
Yeah, it's a place of like weirdness.
Fear. It was a place of fear.
It is.
People were scared.
It is. You look them in the eyes, and they're scared, and they are stressed, and everyone's.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like a kind of like a movie scenario almost.
It was very unreal.
It was very unreal what was happening.
Apocalypse movie, yeah.
And there was no guarantee when and how we're going to get out of this. So that was a big part of this. And of course, what happened, a lot of conspiracy theories. That's what happens. You lock up everyone. You give them a lot of time and internet, and you get a lot of conspiracy theories. And in general, did you basically change your lifestyle much? You worked remotely before.
Yeah, so back to your previous version, how did it change my habit? Not so much.
Not so much, right?
In the beginning, I saw it as well as an opportunity. It's like, well, this is the time to start a course. This is the time to, have your time for yourself and think, okay, what do I want? How do I want to come out of this thing? Because that was for sure. This is not going to be forever. And so let's make the best of it, and don't go binge watching Netflix, but actually
eating Cheetos.
Eating Cheetos. And come out of it like 10 kilos heavier, and knowing all the Netflix series. So that was, for me, it was also kind of, I saw it a little bit as an opportunity. It's easy to get a bit anxious, to get a bit annoyed.
Yeah, I think the news has this tendency. I read the tweet of a guy I follow recently, like saying that the human brain isn't made for all the news in the world at all times, like all the bad news in the world at all times. Because we, especially in this kind of crisis, there's unlimited supply of bad news, right? And of course, the brain isn't made for this. So what happens is you digest it you put it into your head, and then it's too much.
Yeah.
And realistically speaking, like, if you think about how little it actually affected you, it's totally overreacting to the reality.
Yeah.
Right? That's what the news does often. Like, if you're not careful about what to ingest into your brain, then you're overreacting in my experience, to the reality of things, because you kind of it's hard to kind of distinguish between what's really affecting you and what is happening there. and put things in relation, basically.
Yeah. I don't know if you experienced this, but in the beginning, because news was kind of exciting again, there was so much happening that it also became a little bit, you start to become a little bit obsessive, checking the social media.
I of course, every day I check the numbers. In
the
Spain
numbers.
and Germany, I wanted to know what's happening. And it was exciting in some ways, but at the same time, I feel it wasn't good for my overall state of mind and sleep. So I reduced it as much as possible. And it's just too much information, especially if you get it and combine it with Twitter and so on. So because then you have these millions of people kind of, reflecting on that and kind of bouncing on that and giving their opinions. And it's a lot of information, and it's a lot of noise and very little information. Actually.
A lot of noise, yeah. And that's I think a good thing that I think after week 2, I kind of stopped following it.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Starting using this, what is it, like a blocker on my phone, because you become so used to just quickly go to Twitter to see if there's news, quickly go to CNN to see what the new headlines are.
Yeah,
and it's because there's so much going on, it becomes kind of addictive to watch it, but then it's so time consuming as well.
Yeah,
it brings you in a bad state.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't do good things for you overall, but it's somewhat necessary to be aware. I have a friend here who was completely oblivious to what's happening. He was basically, I had to tell him. Basically, I had to tell him what's happening because he doesn't follow any kind of news and doesn't read. He's also an expat in Malaga, right? And he doesn't have the patience or I think language skills maybe to read the news in Spanish. And so I had to summarize it. And he has also, no idea when can we go out and what can we do when, how many people are actually affected here in Malaga and in Spain overall. And so I don't know, it kind of gave me as well like a sense of stability to know like the core facts, but I shouldn't obsess on it.
It was also, when you had a conversation, the first 5 or 10 minutes were all about this coronavirus.
Oh yeah.
So even if you don't follow the news, you're quickly up to date because everybody wants to share the latest findings, the latest news with you. And it was a bit weird as well. I noticed that in the first week or the first 2 weeks, it was kind of, you had to let it sink in, get a little bit used to it. And then in the third week, the amount of calls and video calls I had with friends and family, I never experienced this before, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that kept going for like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then there was a point like saturation and then it dropped back. Everybody was maybe too excited and felt like, this is a good time to connect. And after a while, it was like, okay, we've done our part. So, but I think, and I don't know if you see the same, video calls became more, most people became more used to video calls.
I think we had a big adaptation of these technologies within the normal population. I think in the tech world, we all used Zoom before. I mean, this podcast was always recorded on Zoom. And the normal population didn't even know what that is. They were still on Skype or WhatsApp or whatever they use. But then when the demand kind of for high quality, stable calls rose, then people were adapting, at least Zoom companies were adapting Slack more, and Microsoft Teams and Basecamp and all the stuff that lets you collaborate. So that's actually pretty cool, I think. And working remotely, I think, took a big leap into the future, I think a couple of years, because how many companies say it's impossible for us to work remotely? Guess what? It's not, because otherwise they would have just stopped operations, but they didn't. And it's basically, it has basically given remote work a trial period for a lot of companies.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also the adaptation, because I also remembered a couple of calls I had with friends, and they started working from home, and they came up with things like, how do you do that? If you work home, it's so tempting to,
how do you
spend
separate
some time in the kitchen to do some washing, and they say, well, I've done my things, and normally it takes me, the whole work day, but now I'm done in 4 hours because, there's no time at the coffee machine, there's no commuting, it's very effective also because, people tend to make better to-do lists or so. So in one way, and they found it difficult to actually get used to working online. I think ask for a different approach. You have to get used to it, but then you can become more productive.
It depends on the personality, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some people can't deal with it so well because it's not so social, and the social component is important to them. Then you have the group that wants to mix things up, have both, like local and remote, but then you have people who actually thrive in it. And you could argue that it takes away certain communication channels, but it also takes away maybe, channels that are actually hurting the communication and the productivity and the fairness at work, right? A lot of people discuss that remote work is actually enabling people that were maybe introverts and weren't able to play these political games in the company so well, and which is now not necessary anymore.
Yeah. But what do you mean? Because if they're introverts,
well,
and they have a group meeting, and maybe they're like not really participating, but just listening.
Yes, that is true. But in the classical psychology of basically corporations, right? What happens a lot is that a lot of the politics is played out in meetings and calls, but mostly like in-person meetings and in classical human dominant structures almost, right? So that's why you could argue that like there is a certain persona that is often promoted, and that's mostly like an extroverted and overconfident person, right?
Yeah.
And their ability maybe to present themselves and sell themselves outweigh their actual ability to make good decisions often. But I think remote work takes away a little bit of that distortion and gives a little bit more power to the people who actually are less vocal about their about their opinions maybe, and more focus more on hard work and getting the right decisions, right? And less on the extroverted part of selling yourself. And I think it takes away this communication channel. So basically charismatic people, the question is charismatic people get and extroverted people get promoted more often, but often are not really, or not often, but sometimes are not really qualified to be in these positions. There might be now an opening kind of for people who have the better prerequisites to actually lead, but not the right prerequisites for convincing people that they can.
Yeah, there will be definitely change how you adapt to working remote, setting up your team
Yeah, I think the from a psychological behavioral point of view, the group dynamics, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know, it's just a guess, but to see what kind of effects that has on the structure of a company.
Yeah, that will change as well in a very interesting way. I think everything becomes more equal, and maybe the good. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say how that will evolve, but it will definitely. I mean, this is a big change, basically going from a very traditional way of working, meeting your colleagues every day in the same office, and then suddenly doing those things online. But it's also in smaller things. You become more organized in ways that you plan your meetings ahead. There's a little bit more planning involved and a little bit less. Let's do it on the spot.
Yeah, totally. You need to organize yourself across time zones, across schedules, and availabilities are more flexible, but sometimes that is a problem. Often it happens that you want to solve something now, and then the person is maybe out for lunch or something, and the lunch times differ, and then you don't know when they're coming back and so on. So being in an office, that would be easier, I think, to just go to the desk and say, hey, can you look at this, please, and prioritize this? So this is something, I mean, remote work isn't perfect, but that's something, we have to deal with and plan for, like you said.
Yeah. So, the approach is just a bit different to get it done in a good way. So you need to adapt to it as well. It's not as easy as saying, okay, tomorrow we start doing everything remote. You need some
definitely
time to get into it.
Definitely. Also from a team building perspective, right? What makes you feel like you are a team and you have rapport with your colleagues and the human component.
I had a very interesting discussion with a friend of mine, and he pitched the thing like, once we are like a team that is working remote, then it starts in a different direction. So when you have the opportunity to meet that team, it would make more sense to do something active, like going for a hike.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's actually because a lot of people say, but you miss the connection with the people and you miss their stories. But most of the time you don't really hear them in the office.
Yes, you
do, but it's
at lunch maybe after.
Yeah, you hear those things, but on a good hike and you spend 2-3 hours in nature, you might find out really what this person is about.
But if you're distributed over too much of a distance, then that's not so easy.
No. Yeah, that then becomes a bit more difficult. But the thing is, like, if you had a very, well, let's say traditional thing, you came to the office, you all live in the same city, and then because of lockdown or any other reason, you start doing it remote, then it would make sense that once you meet, you do something, supporting towards the team, like team building, instead of using the time to do work-related stuff. So it's kind of a twist to the whole call.
You can. I mean, it's always good as a mindset to turn these things into wins, right? If you have a challenge, to turn it into an advantage somehow. So you can find that. Maybe, for example, also in the future, virtual reality will help with this. Have some, but of course, until in the foreseeable future, I think, like you said, ideally you would meet and have like real getaways with your team, right?
Yeah. And even if they work from a distance and you plan this 2 or 3 times per year,
Maybe
you need
that makes
to
a
get
difference.
on a flight, but then this weekend it's just team building, and that's it, and that's enough to make sure that there's a good feeling between the team members, and they know how the team members are, not only by working with them remotely.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's also necessary. You cannot. Well, I believe it's hard to really create a team remote. I think there's some value in seeing people in person, and at least do something with them together. After you did this,
I think then it is more feasible.
Then it's possible. Yeah.
I agree.
So it's definitely something you have to bring into a remote team. If you say I want to have a remote team, it's okay. You save on work travel time. You save costs because you don't need an office. But I think you should definitely also invest in at least once or twice a year, plan something team building related.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's a good point to end on, actually, because we have, I think, reached our 30-minute landmark here and covered a lot of topics also. So is there something else you want to share? Maybe something upcoming, something in your project sphere, or?
Yeah, well, I'm going to launch Happy Grow on Products Hunt.
Okay.
Not such a long time from now, and I'm going to, how do you call it, pivot the app into a more like a challenge kind of platform where people can actually challenge other people to do something.
Okay.
Start doing this. Start doing 100 push-ups a day, or start. Name it. Start a vegan a month without eating meat, or things like that. So I'm really excited to do this, and I think it's also something that I've seen a lot during this lockdown, that people start doing these challenges.
What's the website? What's the URL of Happygrow? Happygrow.
Happygrow.com.
Oh, that's a good one. We will link that in the show notes for this episode on iTunes.
Cool.
Great. Then, thanks again for joining this podcast. I mean, we had a kind of a pause here, so I'm happy we're back. Let's catch up soon in person, I would say.
Cool. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right. Good day.
Thank you for listening to the Glowland podcast, the podcast for freelancing and remote work in practice.